Hello, boys and girls. Lord Hawkeye here again, and welcome back to DM Chat. Oh boy, I actually got a couple requests for this one. More problem players. This one, the Min-Maxer. Oh, we all know this one. Yeah, I'm not surprised it was a popular one. But, anyway, let's discuss that. Okay, for those that don't know, the Min-Maxer is the guy who is completely determined to make his character as unfairly powerful as possible. See this a lot, particularly manipulating the rules and stuff like that. Now, some people say, well, what's wrong with that? Everyone wants their character to be strong, right? Right. So, wanting your character to be strong does not necessarily make you a min-maxer. It mainly becomes a problem when it comes at the expense of the actual role-playing. Like I've said before, if you just work on making your character really powerful and you got minimal backstory or any kind of characterization to it, as I've said in a previous video, the problem with that is you're effectively making a Mary Sue, and Mary Sues are not interesting, as we all know. So that's one thing. If you want your character to be strong is good, but it should not come at the expense of the role-playing, because that is what ultimately the game's all about. Otherwise, you're just a bunch of numbers, and go play with a calculator if that's what you're into. And as someone has pointed out, the other problem is if a character ends up way ahead of everybody else, it can cause problems. Like, what do you do if one of your characters is way stronger than the others? Either you make the encounters balanced for the other players, in which case the strong guys just breezing past it and everyone else feels useless, or you scale them towards the stronger player, in which everyone else is struggling and once again they feel useless. So, what do you do? Well, there's a couple ways of going about this. Well, first of all, don't allow people to put in characters to give you a character and have it basically. Well, how I put it is, when people bring you their characters, make sure to characterize them really well right off the bat. Like, ask them, why is your character an adventure? What's his backstory? What's his personality like? What kind of long-term goals does he have? If your player gives a blank stare to these kinds of questions, tell him he needs to get back and finish making his character, because it's not done yet. Yeah, sorry, filling out a character sheet, that's not all of it. There's also coming up with what your character is like. Otherwise, you're not role-playing. Now, let's see. The other thing is with the anyway, and if they're not cooperating with that, offer opportunities for people to get into the role playing, and hopefully all the other players are getting to do all these interesting things, and his character is just good at fighting and absolutely nothing else, and doesn't really have anything else to do in the role playing times. Well, hopefully he'll start to feel left out, and he'll get the hint that a bunch of numbers does not a character make. Like, this is why I have downtime in my sessions, because the players, they don't just dungeon crawl. They have lives, they have goals, they have things they like to do in their spare time, and this helps make them more interesting as characters. This is how I get a lot of people a lot of the newer players kind of out of their shells and actually into the role-playing experience. Like, you see that especially with Laxus. Laxus's player was kind of timid and played his character very passively at first, and as a DM, I kind of made it my goal to try to break him out of that. I got to talk to him. I said, well, what kind of goals would your character like to have? And he thought about opening the store and getting into the golems and all this sort of thing, and yeah, he got into that, got into the flesh crafting, and now he's pretty much now he's really got an interesting character. He's basically, what if a mad scientist was playing for the good side? And I think it's a really neat character. He's really liking this. I think he's having way more fun than he was at first. I don't doubt that one bit. And that's the first thing you can do, is make sure there's lots of opportunities for role playing, so that someone who hasn't really set his character up for that, try to make him feel left out and say, well, you're not really giving me, and if he complains about it, say, well, I want to include your character in this, but you don't define him very well. I really don't know what to do with him. And hopefully that'll give him the hint. But then there's the person who's just determined to make his character unfairly powerful. And, well, there's one thing about that. Is that people who min-max, they have a tendency to extremely over-specialize their character. And in D&D, if you're a good DM, that's something you really shouldn't do. Like, if a character's over-specializing and he's completely getting away with it with no ill consequence, as a DM, that might be a sign that you need to vary up the encounters or vary up the kinds of challenges your party's facing. Because nobody should have one answer to absolutely everything that always works. Because that doesn't exist. There is no such thing as a perfect answer. There's always situations where it doesn't work. So, look at the character. Chances are he's probably put all of his points and specializations all into one thing, and so his character's insanely good at it. But that's going to leave huge gaps in other areas. Like this is a really extreme example. I don't think most people are dumb enough to do this. But I knew a DM who had a character who basically was doing what I call template whoring, where he was adding all kinds of templates onto his character to make himself crazy powerful. He was a werebear, he was a half elemental, he was all this other stuff, and he tried to get vampirism too, although he didn't end up getting that. And to the point where at level 20, he had only 8 hit dice, but it didn't matter because this guy did such ridiculous damage, nothing could stop him. Until one day, he encounters a wizard, and he says, "Okay, turn in my werebear form and charge him, like I always do." And the DM goes, "The wizard says a word and you die." Huh? He says, "Power word kill, look it up. And because you've only got 8 hit dice, you don't get a save against it. Oh, and because you're an outsider, you can't be resurrected." Have fun with that. You don't have to be quite that dickish, but I hope you see the lesson here. He completely left his defenses open to things like that because he over-specialized his character. Like Spoonie's story of the Jedi Hunter when he was journeying with all these Jedi and he hit them with this smoke grenade and they were completely incapacitated. They say, wait, can't I sense his location or something? And Spoonie would say to them, "Did you put any points into that? Oh no, you put everything into lightsaber combat, didn't you?" Yes. And there you see the lesson. Over-specializing should be a bad idea. So if people are getting away with over-specializing as a DM, you need to take that as a sign that you need to mix things up a little bit. You're making your encounters way too predictable, and your players are playing around that. So if people are min-maxing, accept the possibility that might be in response to something you're doing as a DM. If they're over-specializing, that might be a sign that you yourself, the DM, are specializing too much yourself in what you throw at them. So take that into account. Always remember to take a step back and it's just like parenting. If your kids are doing something, take a step back, look in the mirror, and go, is it something I'm doing? Is there something I'm doing that's causing this kind of behavior? That's always a good place to start, and a lot of people have trouble with that because they let their egos get in the way. Anyway, that's the one thing to do with the min-maxer. And because always remember, nothing's invincible, everything has a weakness. Even min-max characters have weaknesses, and they tend to have the most glaring weaknesses, which is why min-maxing should be an extremely risky thing that most players don't want to do. A good player will always want to have some kind of backup plan if his main plan doesn't work. And also always remember, anything your players can do, you as a DM can do it too. That's another big tip to remember. Like Spoonie's story of the squirt gun wars. His players were using these squirt guns filled with this drug in them that was just completely messing up everyone they sprayed with. So Spoonie thought about this. He just thought about that and said, "Hey, if these guys on the street can get this stuff, then a bunch of corporate guys can easily get it too." So he threw a bunch of corporate guys who also had these squirt guns and also had rubber hazmat suits on. And his players just all dropped bricks when they saw that. So always remember, anything your players can do, you can do it too. So, and that's a warning for players. Always be careful about giving your DM ideas, because if you're doing some really crazy combination, always remember your DM might look at that and say, Hey, that's a nice idea. Maybe I should do that sometime. That'll put the fear of God into him. Well, that's a couple tips and tricks I have for dealing with a min-maxer. And all in all, don't worry too much about the min-maxer as long as he's not being too disruptive, and make sure he does recognize that it is a role-playing game and it is a team game. As long as he doesn't lose sight of those things, it's not inherently bad to make your character powerful. I mean, Laxus is getting her own army and she's mutating herself into an unstoppable monster, but she's still a fun character and she still plays well with the group, so I don't care. It's fun. It's fun. I like seeing what crazy idea she's going to come up with next. So it's a good example there, I think. Anyway, that's all I got to say about that. If you've got a topic you'd like discussed or a particular problem player you'd like addressed, since that's the theme we're going with right now, please drop a comment down below or post on my DeviantArt page and you could be the next one. Until then, be aware and be wise.